Hi, I'm Old Sneelock. Welcome to another episode of Old Sneelock's Workshop. This lower wheel is offset to the point where it's letting that blade track off to the edge of this wheel. I'm going to shift these rollers over this way so that this blade is tracking in the center of that. That's going to bring me closer to the vise, but I don't think it'll be a problem. I'll loosen up these socket head cap screws and rotate this around until I get the blade more in the center of the idler roller. 6mm. Good. I'm going to put a washer behind there trying to shove it over. That probably works, but better to find out what the cause is. I think these two bolts here are a problem. These two screws here are loose and letting that wobble all over the place. That is some crappy machining on that thing. No wonder the adjustment was so far off. The holes are drilled in the casting. It's supposed to let that slide out that far and all the way up that far. But because of the way it's been cobbled up, this can only move just so much. This corner needs to be shortened. I can shorten this corner a lot better than I can grind back that casting, because that thin wall casting will be gone. So if I grind this corner back, I can move this over further. That'll let me have more adjustment. But really what I need to do is come this way. I want to line the edge of that blade up with the center of that wheel.
I got the lower guide taken apart. I was getting ready to put it back together again, and the camera died. Unfortunately, I didn't notice, so I didn't record the whole rebuild of the blade guides, both upper and lower.
After I got this fastened back down again and squared up, I was able to get the blade to run on this roller a little closer to the center. It's not exactly centered, but it's closer. The other thing I was able to do is get these bolts centered up and tightened back down. The bolts were looser than a goose, and it just let the blade flop all over the place. So once I got that done, then the blade was tracking on the roller the way I wanted it to, instead of off to this side, because it was actually twisted trying to run off the edge of this roller. The machining on that particular part of it is horrible. After I fixed the lower, I decided if the bottom one was bad, the top one was too, and yep, they were the same thing. Took this all apart, cleaned it up, got it back together again the way it should be, and I think I'm going to be very happy with it now. This plastic knob up here is cracked. It's working and it seems to be holding okay, so I'm not going to replace it right now. One of the problems is it's a metric thread, and I'm going to have to come up with a set of metric thread gauges so I can decide what size bolt it is and get the right one. I'll make a new knob for that, and that'll make things a little better in that situation. I wanted to cut the new jaws for the vise, and that's why I put this saw back together again, was so I could use the bandsaw to do it. When I was cutting the pieces of angle for the new jaws, I noticed that the blade was tracking sideways. That's what got me started on straightening up the blade guides and getting all that stuff fixed. Well, I got it all done. I put the steel in it and started to cut, and it looked like the blade was tracking off to the left. And it was late at night, and I was really tired, and I said, you know what? I'll just grind it square. I've already halfway through the angle iron when I noticed it, and I thought, well, it's okay. We'll make it work. Got all done, made the first cut, and I checked the square on the end of the angle, and the cut was perfectly square. There wasn't any problem with it at all. So then I got to looking. When the leg came loose, this front leg came loose, and I tightened up the legs, I tightened up the legs so I tilted the bed off to the right. So it wasn't a problem with cutting. The blade tracked square to the table, just the table sitting at an angle. So when I get out here today and I'm working on this again, I'm going to bring out a level and I'm going to square up that table. I do need to tighten those legs up a little bit better. Halfway through the project, I found the right wrench, and I've got the right socket now, so I can tighten those bolts up. But I'll square that up, and that should make it look right, and I'll just feel better about making cuts on the saw. That was an error in my judgment because I was looking at the thing without actually seeing it. Now, another thing I noticed looking around at the various types of saws and checking out at Harbor Freight and seeing what's going on, they have a sheet metal guard over the blade. Now, I'm not a big fan of guards. I know, I'm the safety guy. I used to have to beat people up for not wearing their safety equipment and doing all that stuff. But sometimes the guard is just in the way. On this particular case, this saw really needs a guard up here on top. There's a place to mount one. It's badly done. This surface here is not square. This bolt location and that bolt location are out flush with the front. This one is not. They just took a grinder and ground it off because this front edge of the casting actually is crooked. So I'm going to have to, for one thing, get the right size metric bolt because this is all metric now. It was made in Taiwan, 1985, 1986. That's the only 2 years that the company had a registered trademark. The Milwaukee Pneumatic Company was in Los Angeles, California. They registered their trademark in 1985, and in 1987 they no longer existed. So they weren't a real long-lived company. But anyways, I need to square up this surface, and I think I need to build up a little bit there so that I can get a piece of sheet metal just to cover the front of this. I have to cut out a hole for this bearing here. And the saw blade itself runs real close to the front of the casting. So I'm probably going to have to build up some kind of a special cover to go over that. The only reason I want to do it is if this thing is running and you grab a hold of the front of this, you're going to put your hands in that wheel. And there's a saw blade on there and it's probably going to nick you pretty good. So I want to put a piece of sheet metal over the front of this. Not an urgent thing, but it's something that should be done. So now I got the blade guides working. They're adjusted correctly so that the blade's tracking right. They're pinching the blade the way they should. Cleaned up. I put some dry slide in them. The bearings work a lot better now. They're a lot happier being there. And I think I've got that part of it pretty well fixed. I can go ahead and work on the vise jaws, get those squared away. And I want to put a shim in there and a bushing on the backside because when you tighten this down, it just runs up against that casting. And all there is a little shoulder on the bolt. And that's going to wear away if you use it very much. That's the saw projects for today. And that should take care of all that. If you have any suggestions for a new video, questions about today's video, or any of the other videos on the channel, just drop a note in the comments. You know I read them all. Thanks for watching.